Just a thing I want to do for myself, because this is a thing here. If you could see on screen, Warhammer 40k Purge Team. This is a TTRPG type project. If you're unfamiliar, TTRPG basically just means tabletop role-playing game. Like D&D is the ultimate example of that, or even like Cyberpunk Red, or there is a 40k one that exists in the past called Deathwatch RPG, which is its own thing. But I've basically just made one of my own that I play with friends and stuff a lot. I've been very to the Discord. If you haven't seen, if you're not a part of the Discord, it's in there in our multimedia creations thing, and I'm making this as like a explanatory process, so I could point people that are curious about it to be like, hey, go look at this. This is how you can learn how to play it and stuff, because it's mostly set up, but a lot of like core concepts and maybe some other stuff is kind of not exactly there, because it's made for my reference. This is for me to basically look at and hand off to the players, my friends and stuff that I've played this game with. We're going to run through this. I'm going to descriptize it for all you lovely people watching the stream. The game itself, at least the campaign that's built into it that I've been running, my like campaign for it, has nothing to do with Space Marine 2 and or Titus whatsoever. But I just really like this art of Titus, so I slapped it on. Effectively, what this is, a thing that allows you to play as veteran members of the Imperium. The Imperium obviously being humanity in the world of Warhammer 40k, the grimdark far future, 40,000 years into the future, and taking on a bunch of different of the Warhammer factions in this kind of apocalyptic solar system where there's a lot going on all at once. I don't know if I will get into like the specific campaign story beats that I have written out for myself, but that is all a part of it. There's a lot of lame shit at the beginning. you gotta get the vegetables out of the way so that you can understand the other stuff that comes up later that has to tie into the different classes and different aspects and everything else like that. So, first of all, we have, my thing is cut off. Hold on. These are the core roles. These are like the main bread and butter I have set up for everything. Everything from backgrounds and attributes. It has its own special attribute system, rather than using like the traditional strength, dexterity, willpower type stuff you would see in D&D. Backgrounds. There is a system I have in here set up to add the... There's a joke in Warhammer 40k that if you're a named character, you have a power buff, which is mostly true. A character who is named is a part of a special faction like the Ultramarines, the Blue Space Marines, and doesn't wear a helmet is... I mean, it's technically plot armor, but they are, in the universe of 40k, tend to be stronger than your faceless grunt. That is a mechanic for characters that I have included in this, and that'll tie into backgrounds and stuff. Stuff for combat. This doesn't really play on the tabletop like D&D or anything like that, or if you're familiar with like Baldur's Gate, which is very faithful to D&D. This doesn't play like that. This is more of a blend of the gameplay you would see in a game like Gears of War Tactics and Warhammer 40k on the tabletops. You have like to hit, resistances, stuff like that, and then like a bunch of actions you can take and a bunch of actions for you to use throughout your turn. You kind of go through it like that. Corruption, obviously, you gotta have chaos. I have a little bit of a chaos corruption mechanic in there, and then unit levels, which is something that's more so back end for a what you would call the game master, dungeon master, whatever. Basically the person who sits behind the screen who is controlling what happens with the game. Have everything set up to where it is easy to get into. Like, it uses some of the core aspects of D&D, but the way that they're applied into the game is that everything is much more simplified or like leveled out. I've got a campaign currently in the works that I've been playing with friends with this on and off for a few months, and I've even done some one-shots with some other friends and stuff. And every time we've done it, it's been a hell of a time. I really enjoy this system, and I think it's a lot of fun if you get people who are either into Warhammer already, or even people like I played a one-shot with some buddies of mine, and they knew absolutely nothing about Warhammer. And even then, it was still a good time. These are your core attributes. So, in D&D, say you'd have strength, strength, dexterity, agility, constitution, charisma, wisdom, intelligence. I think that's it. There's only 6. This one is 7, and they are more like thematically attuned to Warhammer as a setting. So you have order, diligence, fury, labor, honor, willpower, and faith. Please explain in my language. Basically, the way that these attributes work, if you're unfamiliar with TTRPGs, is that they affect different things you do on the board, or like when you're interacting with different stuff. So you can see there's a quick guide down here in the bottom left. Order is going to be your reloads and basically how you interact with NPCs and stuff. It's kind of how organized are you, how good are you under pressure, stuff like that. Diligence is for aiming, it's your reflexes, it's your dodging out of the way if something's trying to stab you through the chest. It's your ability to hold down your aim and make sure that you're actually hitting on target. Fury is your kind of rage. I'm not talking to Siri, shut up. Fury is your character's rage and basically how long they're able to last in combat. And every extra point above Fury that you go up, you get more actions. So the higher your Fury score, the more you can do on your turn. Some of them get up there. I've had to nerf a few of my subclasses for abusing the number of actions and everything else like that. Labor is more straightforward. This is your physical strength and endurance. The higher your labor, the more you can lift, the more you can throw, the more you can push, and the more you can like withstand if you get like hit in the chest by like a bolter round or like a rocket launcher or something, which, you know, if you're a regular person and you have low labor, it'll hurt a lot. If you're like a space marine and you're higher on the labor scale, it won't fuck with you as much. Honor is between you and your allies, basically your ability to work with them and work well together. So basically whenever you are trying to heal or be healed by your teammates, honor is what you would use to determine how effective it is and like how, if they can actually heal you, if they can help you get patched up, or if they might make the problem worse. Willpower is more of a battle awareness thing, making sure that you're not going crazy. You want to make sure that you're steeled and prepared. So whenever you're in a fight or you're being attacked by something that is too big for you to handle, you don't buckle under the pressure of everything going on and just fall apart. And then faith, obviously, is a more arbitrary kind of... It's more between you and the DM, because it's like your character's faith in the God Emperor and faith in humanity, or faith in something related to the Imperium that keeps you from dying when you're on death's edge. Basically your death saves, stuff like that. These are more generic definitions and rules. I don't know how legible this is on the stream in my little viewfinder. It's very, very small. Standard rules, definition type stuff that you will have when you are playing the game and interacting with different stuff throughout the game. So first off, health. All units have 6 health off the brink. We'll get into some stuff later that hero characters gain more, but for the most part, units, as in player characters, start with 6 health. That might sound like it's not a lot. It is, for the way that combat is set up. It'll make more sense when we get into it. It is, like I said, where it's more akin to something like Gears, where everyone has the same health. You just build up resistances and like a shield to help you survive tougher battles and things like that. But your health, traditionally, starts at 6. When you go down to 0 health, you enter the dying state. Dying is you're basically down but not out. You're reduced to 1 action. You can crawl or attempt to heal yourself. This is where your honor comes in. where you basically try to self-res, or you hope that a ally can come in and give you a little boost. Resistance is basically just straight up damage mitigation. So say if you have a base +1 resistance, if somebody comes at you and they're attacking you and they hit you for 2 damage, but you have that 1 resistance, 1 point of resistance mitigation, you're only going to take 1 damage. This is very similar to a stat as Warhammer 40k is played on the tabletop, where you have your saves effectively. And this is like that, but less, more so a hard stat versus a soft stat, because in Warhammer you roll for your saves in order to make it or not. This basically just means if you're tough enough, if you have high enough resistance, if you're someone like a Space Marine in Terminator armor, some random bandit coming up to you and hitting you with a stick is not going to be enough to kill you. It won't be enough to even harm you or scratch your armor. It'll barely be a little nudge, versus if you're fighting something like, say, a Chaos Knight or something more dangerous, then you're talking about something that can do more damage all at once, that is more at risk of actually breaking through that resistance and doing a higher number of damage to you. Shield, this is your soft health. You'll see stuff referred to as true health and soft health or shield. True health is your base 6. That does not get modified. Seen this sooner, try to catch up is highly interesting. You're welcome. This whole guide, it's in a Google slideshow, is linked into my, in the Discord. In D&D, it said even a level 0 character is sort of badass. I mean, like, at D&D, when you're like level 0 or level 1, it's just you're like somebody who's like starting out. You don't start out as like a medieval peasant that doesn't have any combat skill. You're starting out as somebody who's already kind of been at it a little bit. You're just going from somebody who's like a generic soldier up to killing God. And that is where resistance and shield and stuff like that takes place in this, where somebody who's a Space Marine in Terminator armor versus a regular guardsman, that Terminator can take a lot more abuse before it actually starts to feel it versus the guardsman. You know, shield basically all the way back, and it regenerates. Think like the shield mechanic you have in Space Marine 2. It comes back slowly versus your true health you need to have restored with med packs, things like that, stims, or by taking a long rest and kind of waiting around to get your bearings back. Versus a shield, you can go from one fight to the other, back to back, and have your shield restored and ready to go. And each class has a slightly different amount of shield, and you can get shield from different abilities, items, stuff like that, that will affect it. Thematically is just more health, like over health. Like if you can be healed over your maximum health, that counts as shield. There are just certain enemy attacks and things like that that will attack you through your shield. So you gotta look out for things like that. These are more standard D&D stuff. To hit is basically saying what it takes to hit your target. This is normally referred to as armor class. I refer to it as armor class in here, as it is referred to in D&D, at least 5th edition. Basically, say if you're fighting an enemy who has an armor class of 14, and you're shooting them with your, your bolter, you have your diligence stat to help you aim. You have to roll on the dice, normally a d20, and you have to roll higher than 14, plus you would add your diligence modifier to that, and it has to be over 14 to hit your enemy. That just says you hit them, it doesn't say how much damage you do. You then have damage based on your weapon that you calculate after the fact. Unit level doesn't mean your character level. They are one and the same, but it doesn't work as in you start at level 1 and you work your way up to level 20. Depending on the class you pick, you might start above level 1. I don't think there's anyone who is actually any of the classes that are actually at 1. I think 2 or 3 is the lowest. But basically, what it means is it's not a representative of how much you've leveled up, but how dangerous your character is. Say, like the Space Marine Terminator, off the top of my head, starts at unit level 7, versus the regular Guardsman or the Sister of Battle starts at unit level 3. Basically saying, bare minimum, the worst Terminator to ever exist is a little bit more than twice as strong as the worst sister of battle to ever exist, and that's kind of how unit level works. There is a mechanic for unit levels to affect what you're fighting. Basically, stuff that's a weaker level of you will take more damage, and stuff that's a higher level than you will deal more damage to you. So basically, if you're just starting out, if you're low unit levels, like you're a 5 or a 4, and you're like, I want to go fight the Demon Primarch, who's like a unit level 20, you're going to be fucked, because the way I have it set up is that it's going to sound complicated, but basically however many times you could subdivide your own unit level into the enemy is how hard they hit you. So if you're unit level 5, and the boss big demon you're fighting is unit level 20, it will deal 4 times damage to you, because you can divide yourself into its unit level 4 times. Army cost, more if you're running a game. Just kind of keep in mind the unit levels. I normally go for like a 60 point cost for like 5 people, and then like 30 or less for 3 or less people. Because it just changes wildly. It'll change the dynamic wildly if you have like a group of all guardsmen and like some sisters versus a party that's all space marines. Because Space Marines, obviously, they're a lot tougher than like regular guardsmen. They can handle a lot more abuse, and they can take on tougher enemies. Versus if you have guardsmen, they can't. Depending on the weapon you have, it will do a certain effect that is applied whenever you critical attack an enemy. Critical just meaning that when you roll to hit, you roll a perfect natural 20. You roll a 20 on the dice. And whenever you critical attack with something like that, you deal one of these effects depending on which weapon you're holding. And then, as it says, unless stated otherwise, it just lasts until the end of their next turn. So it's basically just a one-turn thing. Unless it states otherwise, like bleed, and I think flame as well. No, never mind. And then the only one that doesn't apply on critical attacks here is stealth attack, which obviously applies whenever you're in stealth and you attack somebody. Broadly speaking, all of the different weapon types and their ranges you will encounter. You can see from left to right, you have the type of weapon, its effective range, its effect, and then how many times you can fire it before you have to reload. I don't normally, because I don't think it's very fun, I don't think there's a point to it, I don't track ammo counts for something like this. Oh, fuck you, bot. I don't track ammo in a game like this. I think it just takes away from it, and it's a lot less fun. Warhammer is about rule of cool. I don't want to sit here and track how many bullets you have in your bolter. So it's basically every time you shoot on an action is reduction from your magazine, and each different type of weapon has a certain amount of shots they can make before they have to reload using your order again. Small arm ballistics, which would be handguns, pistols, that kind of thing. A ballistic weapon being something that fires an actual physical bullet. It has an effective range of 5 to 25 feet. If you don't know, at least the way I calculate everything is on a 5-foot system, where if you're looking at a board for D&D, each square on the board represents about 5 feet. Or if you do it Warhammer style, you can get a thing of measuring tape, and each inch on the board is about 5 feet. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't shoot further than 25 feet with your pistol. Obviously, pistols don't shoot that far anyways. They shoot way further than that to begin with. Every time you fire at something that is outside of your effective range, you're basically shooting with disadvantage, which means you roll twice and you take the lower number. Basically meaning it's a lot harder to make your shots when they are outside of your effective range. Bottomless mag route? It's not bottomless mag, it's more that you have an infinite number of magazines. So your pistol, you can fire it 3 times, and then you have to reload it. So your magazine does run out of ammo, but there is no limit on how many magazines your character can fire or be holding, or whatever. You are well-armed members of the Imperium who are not going to be running out of ammo and being left for dead. There may be specific weapons, particularly really, really powerful ones, that do have limits on ammo and stuff like that, or like grenades that have a limit on how many you have before you need to replenish them. But for most standard weapons you will have, that limit just doesn't exist. Oh god, fucking wonderful, right? Just fantastic. As I said at the beginning of this, there is kind of a joke in the Warhammer 40k community that if you're a character who has a name, you're infinitely more important. It's just basically just describing what plot armor is, but this is a plot armor mechanic in the actual RPG. So you can play as a hero, which is basically makes you a named character. You get some bonuses like bonus unit levels, bonus attribute points, and a higher health pool of 9 rather than 6 true health. But once your character dies, that's it. They're done. No more. Whereas if you play as a regular soldier, you are the faceless grunt in the crowd, but if your character dies, it's not as big of a risk because you have a pool of respawns that you come back with. So if your character dies, even if they have kind of, stronger equipment or something like that, you're just replaced with another faceless grunt who gains the same equipment. War merits. This is kind of going into the background of your character. So on the left, you have the legacy of your hero, and these are different backgrounds for named hero characters. Basically, what makes your hero a hero, and you get a different bonus depending on which one you go with there. On the right, you have the duty of your company. Basically, out of your entire company of whatever soldier you pick, when they're being replenished, this is what your company is known for, what they do and how they act, and then you get different bonuses based on that as well. We go over, this is unit levels themselves. This is it laid out. At the bottom, this sort of just summarizes what I was talking about earlier, where your unit level subdivided into the unit level of an enemy determines how strong they are to you and or how strong you may be to them. So you have it going all the way from mortal, superhumans, demigods, Olympians, paragons, warmongers, and eternal. 20 plus in this scale is the God Emperor and the Chaos Gods. You cannot get to 20 or higher than 20. None of the enemies are at 20 or higher than 20, because if you were fighting something with a unit level of 20, you are not winning no matter how hard you try or how well you roll. There is no winning against something. Go away, we're doing a software update. There is no winning against something that is unit level 20 plus. I don't have anything instituted for that. I just have it included for the sake of the universe. If you're running this game yourself as a game master, there is nothing stopping you from being like, hey, Korn is here. If your characters are in the warp or something like that, and then they just have to deal with it. But that's not something I have any specific stat blocks for. It is just describing those entities of a higher being, like the God Emperor and the Chaos Gods. These unit levels are important because as your character increases in unit level, the longer they're alive and the more accolades they achieve, you get these things called war heroics. These are not afforded to characters that are unit level 1 through 3 because they're just mortals. They're not that special. Once you start gaining up through the tiers, normally the way I run it, this is again a game master dependent thing, the way I run it is that every time a party of characters completes a deployment, which is basically a set of quests that they will get leaving the home base, go out and do the quests, and by the time they get back to the home base, that's the end of one deployment, and they gain a unit level, an attribute point, stuff like that. So as they go up, there's this list of different abilities, and basically as you achieve each, the next set, based on your unit level, you get one ability out of the 2. So each has 2, and they get increasingly more powerful to the point by the time you're at the state of Warmonger, at the very top, you are being personally protected by the God Emperor himself. And there's just, all the fun stuff going on there. And then obviously this says, again, Eternals, who are 20 plus on the unit level scale, You cannot even get to that level. It tops out at 19. 20 is the Emperor and the Chaos Gods. This is a list of things for Chaos Corruption. Also is a very Game Master dependent thing. This is a list of different things you can get if you are being favored by one of, if not multiple, of the Chaos Gods. So you have the King of Slaughter, Khorne. The more bloodthirsty you are, the more furious you are, things like that. You may gain Khorne's favor, which is mostly a thing that gives you more damage and more the ability to basically do more in melee. Get up close and fuck people up. I've had 2 different player characters running this campaign that have fallen to Khorne because they are so very specifically Blood Angels, because there was a mechanic for Blood Angels I very explicitly had that just so happened to put them down the Khorne pipeline. That has been nerfed a little bit, so it's not as common. But this is more up to the discretion of the Game Master, depending on what you think would apply to the different Chaos Gods. Obviously, you have Khorne, King of Slaughter, Combat, Violence, Blood, Tzeentch, the Lord of Change, Strategy, and Intelligence is a great way to get his attention. If your characters are doing really like roundabout strategy, stabbing people in the back, coming up with really intricate plans, that's a good way to get noticed by Tzeentch. Nurgle, the Plague God, Cycles of Life and Death and Decay, and then obviously Slaanesh, Prince of Pleasure, Heights of Perfection and Excess. So being really, really prideful, gluttonous, that's where you're going to fall into Slaanesh. And these are set up so they get stronger the more and more you fall into the favor of any one Chaos God. And if it gets bad enough and you are not treated by a... I'm going to forget the name right now. But if you're not cleansed by something like that, or one of the Sisters of Battle, or someone in the Ecclesiarchy, or even the Inquisition, you'll fall further and further into chaos until you are fully corrupted, and then you basically become a bad guy. Not Grey Knights, the thing that Leandros is in Space Marine 2, with the skull mask, but I'm forgetting, it's like a really specific name. Justiciar is one of the units that is Chaplain, there you go. I wanted to say Justiciar, but that's like that's like an executioner for Space Marines. Yeah, Chaplain. The Space Marine Chaplain who will help you root out your chaotic corruption and become pure once more, as long as it hasn't gotten too bad, otherwise you'll get corrupted. Like in a game I was running for friends of mine, one of them fell to Khorne. He didn't really make any efforts to stop it, and he kind of just went on until his character devolved into becoming a full-on demon prince. And it's a fun character moment to have with your players if you are running this if you are a game master running this specific campaign. Here comes the fun bit. These are the multiple different classes you can choose from to be as a player. As of right now in the guide, the bottom 2, as of right now, are not fully complete with stats and classes and stuff like that, the Mechanicus and the Heroes of the Imperium. But these top 3 are Agents, the Astartes, and Sororitas, the Battle Sisters, all female, power armor. They're more holy, they're more anti-chaos, they're more of like a flavorful guardsman type thing. Space Marines, obviously Angels of Death, big power armor dudes on the cover. This is, out of all the campaigns I've run, 90% of all of my players have picked Space Marines. Obviously, I haven't even gotten to playtest any of like the Agents of the Imperium or most of the Sisters of Battle because just nobody picks them. But I do have them statted out and everything in this guide. So we go through. This is Space Marines. Now, these are all descriptions that I just copy and pasted from the Warhammer Lexicanum to basically give you a little bit of flavor text about what the Space Marines are. If you're unfamiliar with 40k, Space Marines are the Angels of Death for the Emperor of Mankind. They are trans-modified, mutated humans that are buffed up with all sorts of drugs, surgeries, things like that to make them into the perfect killing machines. They are fast, they are lethal, they are experts in a lot of the things they do, and they're basically big, giant sci-fi crusaders. You'll see this number 10 here. This is the average unit level of Space Marines. So some Space Marines are above this and below this, but this is like the average you're going to get to. I think that might be out of date though. I believe it's lower. One too many things they can do when it comes to their genes, there's a lot. The way that these classes will work is you have your archetype is your class. So say like a Space Marine Terminator or a Space Marine, the Phobos Infiltrators, the Snipers, or an Apothecary, the Medic, things like that. That's your archetype. Your subclass is your chapter. For Space Marines, obviously they have a fuckload of chapters. Most of them, at least like the first founding ones, are in here. Including some of the traitor ones. For Sisters of Battle, they have their orders, which are basically kind of the same thing as chapters, but just for Sisters of Battle and how they do things. And then for Agents of the Imperium, you have battle doctrines, which is how they fight. There's no custodies in here. There are custodies. They're wrapped up in the Heroes of the Imperium thing. We'll get to that later. And then the Agents of Imperium have their how they fight. If they just come down with the hammer, or if they want to be more surgical, or if they want to be all information based, that's all there. We'll get into it when we get there. Space Marines, this is all stat stuff, what they begin with, and little bits of extra flavor text and things like that. So you see like Space Marines are immune to being bled out. Their blood is too strong, it will just clot up and they won't die from it, unless they're literally missing limbs or like half their body. They start out with 30 speed, meaning within a single action they can move 6 inches on the board, which I think is low for regular Space Marines in 40k, but it's a little bit shrunk down. Starting with 2 actions, obviously impacted by Fury. They have a base resistance +2, and they gain 1 attribute point every time they level up. So now we will go into classes. This is what each class archetype is going to look like. So this is the most basic one. This is your Space Marine Captain. You see in the top left, that's your unit level. This Space Marine Captain is unit level 5. Again, on the right side, you have some flavor text from the wiki and stuff like that about what the specific archetypes are and how they act. Here in the middle is all of your equipment. So you have the top one is normally going to be a ranged weapon. Here, the Space Marine Captain actually has 2, so he can choose between taking a standard bolter pistol or taking a plasma pistol. Then he also has a chainsword for his melee there on the second rung, and on the third one is his armor. He just has kind of generic power armor, and then the armor class and any extra descriptors are there. And then each class archetype gets these 2 abilities. For the Space Marine Captain, obviously his main ability is the fact that he is a captain, so he can order people around and tell them what to do. And then some other stuff, like when they die, he gets some extra things that are going on with that. The next Space Marine archetype we have is Terminators. Veterans in really, really heavy armor. Again, he's got 2 different options for his ranged weapon between the assault cannon, which is like a minigun, and a heavy flamer. And then he's got the big power fist. It's, big fist, hits hard. The armor and abilities. We have Infiltrators. You can see here 2 weapons again. Big bolter, or a sniper bolter rifle, and the Devastator, which if you don't know, is like a rocket launcher rifle in Warhammer. It's very Space Marine-y. And then you can see for his melee, instead of having a melee option, he actually has the option between taking a melee in the form of the power knife or taking a pistol to go alongside his choice of sniper. Phobos armor has extra speed. Abilities are very, very sniper stealth based. Moving on from that, we have the aggressor flight suits. These are the big Space Marine kind of like tanky suits that have jetpacks built into them, so they can fly around with them. Land and do some extra stuff. This one only has 2 weapon options because their weapons are built into the suit that they're in, and then they get extra abilities and stuff for stuff that's attached to the suit. This one's a lot less modular than something like the traditional Space Marine armor, but it gives you a lot of bonuses right at the gate. And you can see unit level 6. This is the second strongest, I think. third strongest, because we have Space Marine Librarian. Space Marine Wizard. Effectively, these are the ones that are most open to being corrupted, so if you're a game master, make sure you use this one for its maximum narrative potential on the board. They're kind of just going to rush in with weapons, and they have access to a thing called the Psyker table. Anytime you want to use Psyker magic, you just roll. If you roll too low, you will hurt yourself because you're basically calling on hell to do stuff. Being a Jedi equivalent, kind of. They are very dangerous to themselves and their allies if they're doing stuff incorrectly. If they roll too low, they will fuck people up. They have this thing called the Psyker table, which is basically a gambling system to see how strong your spell is. So whenever you roll and you hit with a Psyker spell, you roll, say, it begins at a d20 and it builds, or it goes down the rung of dice. So if you roll on a d20, between 1 and 17 will just cast different spells, and it'll tell you what kind of spell you are casting, whether you are giving extra shield to your allies, or you're turning your enemies on themselves, or you're just hitting them with a bolt of lightning. Or if you roll a 19 into a 20 or an 18, you move on to the next dice. So from a d20, you move on to the d12, which has its own rung of more powerful spells. If you roll an 11 or a 12, you move on to the d10, and then on to the d8, and then on to the d6, and then finally ending on the d4, which has a list of abilities that can range from opening a giant rift to the warp that kind of sucks everyone in and is gonna fuck you over, or we'll just like delete 5 people off the board at random, which I think is stolen directly from the original Deathwatch TTRPG. But yeah, it's a full thing that you basically are, I mean, literally you're rolling dice, but you're making a big roll of the dice anytime you want to do something with the Psyker, and you're not prepared for it. Then you obviously have Space Marine Apothecaries, kind of the same as the others. They have extra abilities, stuff for healing allies, so you can kind of, in the same way that you're not tracking ammo and how many magazines you have, the Apothecary doesn't track how many stims they have. They can kind of just heal infinitely as long as they're rolling well enough, versus if you don't have an Apothecary, you kind of have to just find medical supplies as you go. This is a big wall of text basically telling you what Deathwatch is. If you're playing as a Space Marine in this system, you are playing as a Space Marine member of Deathwatch, which are veteran Special Operations Space Marines from all of the different chapters, all of the different flavors that come together to work on very specific missions, mainly against aliens, Xenos, and things like that. And this basically just tells you what the Deathwatch are and how they operate. And then we have the many, many chapters of Space Marines, at least the Loyalists. These are all 9 Loyalists, the first founding chapters, including the Black Templars. I included them specifically as a successor chapters because the Templars do have their own army in 40k, the tabletop, so I thought it was fitting to include that successor, even though there aren't any other successors added here, stat-wise. Not saying that you couldn't, as the game master, implement successor chapters, or even just have a player character elect to play as a successor, but just kind of taking the stats and abilities of their main chapter. You pick your Space Marine archetype, whether it's a Terminator, Captain, the flight suits, Infiltrator, Apothecary, etc., and then you come through and you pick your chapter. Each of these slides will look like this. You have at the top is War Gear. You get both of those. So each class comes with 2 extra pieces of equipment. Say for Ultramarines, here at the beginning, you get a copy of the Codex Astartes, which basically gives you a big boost of order, and then also a power sword. Some of the classes also begin with a power sword, but you basically just get an extra power sword to go along with it, or if you had a different melee weapon, or even if you had no melee weapon, you would take the power sword as well. And then obviously you have abilities on each of these. The top one isn't really an ability, it's more so of the oath of the chapter. So say this is Ultramarines, they have the Oath of Ultramar. The Sons of Macragge, Ultramarines, and kind of going through the doctrine of the chapter itself. And then the other two abilities are specific to Ultramarines, giving them a specific blessing of a attribute or a core gameplay statistic. And then their secondary ability is kind of also tying into that same attribute. 80% more brothers than other chapters. Yeah, Ultramarines are like most Space Marines in the galaxy of 40k are Ultramarines. Statistically, most members of Deathwatch should just be Ultramarines, but that would make too much sense math-wise. So yeah, each chapter, as well as having its main identity of, you know, what the chapter is in Warhammer 40k as a thing, also has an identity of how it plays on the board. So Ultramarines, Order, they're the guys that are good at spreadsheets and math. Next, we have Salamanders, obviously. Big Hammer, the Drake Mail, basically dragon skin, you get added to it. Oath of Nocturne, the, you know, humanity is great, the greatest thing to protect in the Imperium, as the Salamanders believe. Ability for being larger, because Salamanders are just the biggest Space Marines. So they get a boost to labor, and obviously they get their blessing of diligence to make sure they have their eyes on all the innocent people being trampled over in the war zone. We have Space Wolves, who have their whole lycanthropy thing built in here, which is basically where the Space Wolf will get stronger and stronger and stronger, but kind of turn into a werewolf as they go. And that's the way I have this sped up. So they're kind of like a more berserker type class. Imperial Fists stand strong. They start with the shield. They have specific oaths and abilities of labor, and they are immune to stagger, which can be powerful if you have it set up specifically in a way. And they also, for Imperial Fists, because they are a fleet-based chapter, they don't have a homeworld necessarily. They have like a fleet that goes by. You have a specific ship in orbit, at least for this campaign that I have set up, called the Longevity. And the thing about the Imperial Fists, their special thing is that they can just call down bombardments from the ship in orbit down on their enemies. Then we have Black Templars, who have special stuff for their crusade, basically fucking over the enemy to bring it on. And the Templars, as they are a successor of the Fists, instead of having another ability down here, they just get to pick one of the war gear options from the Imperial Fists. Knights, this is your Dark Angels. They get their abilities. Cloak to be extra knighty. A special power sword to be extra knighty. And then abilities. Special stuff for melee. And a Blessing of Honor. Oath of Caliban. Dark Angels. Most of these are trying to kind of stay faithful to the flavor of Space Marine, while also fitting in line with specific attributes, mechanics within the game itself. Iron Hands, extra Tech Marine equipments, a special plasma pistol, their Oath of Steel, the weakness of my flesh, strength of steel, Iron Hand stuff, a special blessing of willpower, and they actually have a thing that gives them bonus labor, but minus willpower, depending on how many limbs they replace with robotic parts. As you know, the Iron Warriors love to replace their limbs with robotic counterparts. Doing so makes you stronger, but makes you weaker in will. Because, you know, you're more metal than man. We have our vampires, the Sons of Sanguinius, Blood Angels. They get special vampire stuff. Start with crack grenades, and their abilities are all Faith, and Red Thirst, basically being anytime they execute an enemy. Execution is something you can do whenever you are killing an enemy or if an enemy it goes into the dying state after they get down to 0 HP. There are a few specific abilities that let you execute not at the dying state, but that's separate. Whenever they execute, they can consume the flesh of an enemy and basically heal themselves and boost themselves up vampire style. But it can make them go mad. The 2 players I had go mad, fall a corn, and become a demon prince were both members of the Blood Angels. So it seems to be mechanically incentivized. And then obviously Raven Guard, stealthy. They have the ability to enter stealth when they're just in the battlefield with the like the stealth boy that you have in Space Marine 2 and stuff like that. You get that with the Raven Guard. Go into stealth. Special binoculars, stuff like that. Extra blessings of stealth. They do extra damage coming out of stealth. Things like that. Then, yeah. Last but not least, White Scars, who begin with a war bike. Just because I felt like it would make sense if they didn't start with just a bike. White Scars are all speed and doing it quickly. Basically, White Scars, you see here, do it quickly. Their bonus, their ability, basically makes them stronger at the beginning of battle, but if an encounter goes on for too long, they kind of lose their edge and lose that bonus. Their Condus's chapters, you mean the successors? I'm not familiar with how they separate the successors, but they are cool. They are, the very Mongolian-esque chapter. All speed, no stopping. And then we have embarrassed chapters. Now, as members of Deathwatch, they are kind of allowed to exist, although they wouldn't go out and tell anyone that they come from these chapters. These are specific chapters of Space Marines that 10,000 years ago betrayed the Emperor of Mankind, and most of them fell to chaos. Now, these are classes that very specifically, if a player wanted to, could play as one of these traitor legions in Deathwatch, who are just embarrassed, who just don't show their iconography, and just sort of exist as a very embarrassed loyalist, forever proving their loyalty by serving in the Deathwatch. And these all have very specific abilities that are tied into what the chapters are known for when they fell to chaos, and are probably a little bit more susceptible to chaos in that way. First of all, we have Night Lords. They get special stuff. Blessings of Fear. These are more... You'll see a lot of the abilities and the blessings of the Traitor, the Heretic chapters, are more intangible, whereas the Loyalists, all of theirs are based on the hard set mechanics of the game. Blessings of speed, blessings of attributes, your labor, order, willpower, faith, everything like that. With the traitors, you have stuff that is more like reaching for power and is more almost arbitrary in a way that it doesn't directly influence mechanics that already exist, but they are fit specifically for that chapter. So Night Lords, obviously, they're evil Batman, and they like to torture people. They have a blessing of fear, where they can make enemies afraid of them as they go, obviously depending on what types of enemies there are. Like, you can't really make Tyranids afraid of you, but if you're fighting, say, like regular-ass humans, like Traitor Guardsmen or something like that, you can kind of make them shit their bricks and run away. World Eaters, obviously, Conquerors, they get special stuff. They get the Butcher's Nails, which makes them strong when they're low on health. Blessing of Carnage, which basically allows them to regain shield rapidly if they are killing a certain number of enemies within their turn. And they do have an ability that is identical to the ability the Space Marine Captain had. It's just a bit stronger. So if you're playing as a Space Marine Captain, you don't get both. It does say on that slide that this ability will just take it over. But you do basically get access to it if you play as any of the other archetypes, and then also choose World Eater to go with it. We have the Death Guard, who gets special stuff. Biochemical weapons, noxious grenades, and basically special abilities for sitting within their poison clouds. Word Bearers, you have loyalist word bearers who still preach the good truth that the God Emperor is a god, and now in the 41st millennium, the rest of the Imperium agrees. So they kind of get the opposite of the Ultramarine thing, where the Ultramarines are based entirely on order, and the Codex Astartes doesn't really talk about the Emperor as a god. You have here with word bearers is in the opposite, where the God Emperor is God, and they have an ability here in their blessing and their extra ability here, which is kind of like vicious mockery in D&D, but specifically for telling off demons and heretics in Warhammer. So you can tell demons that their gods are fake gods and that the God Emperor is the one true god, and really fuck up their day. And then obviously, Emperor's children, they're all about perfection. They get extra stuff. They get to re-roll their, like any failures on the dice and stuff like that to basically make up for their mistakes and make sure they're just absolutely perfect. Moving on from Space Marines, we have Sisters of Battle, which are weaker on average than Space Marines, but still, they're just more specialized, specifically into anti-chaos. Biggest thing is they use more faith. Obviously, you see they get Faith and Fury bonuses out the gate. Better against chaos, against demons, versus Deathwatch was more Xenos focused, more anti-alien, or just kind of anti-everything. Space Marines are a switchblade. It can do a lot of different things pretty okay. Sisters of Battle are more like a sword, but a sword specifically for killing demons. And okay at killing other things, but, you know, not as well. You have your standard Sister of Battle with a lasgun and a power sword and or a chain sword and special abilities for their faith and basically helping them stand out against stronger battles. Space Nun faction? Yeah. Nuns in space. Nuns with guns. A lot of the Battle Sisters things is about being overwhelmed or outnumbered. So if they are attacking an enemy that is stronger than them, or they are outnumbered by enemies, they get special abilities that allow them to call on their faith in the God Emperor and things like that to hold out against said enemies. You have Sisters Zephyrims, which are basically Battle Sisters with jetpacks, and they're a little bit insane. Again, special weapons, pistol, power sword, chain sword, all that stuff. Extra abilities for flying, and has a massive boost of faith because they don't have the ability to speak, which is a real thing in the lore, which I implemented here. If your player is choosing to play as a Zephyrim, they cannot speak Gothic. They kind of just ramble in ways that are incoherent to most people, but a lot of the sisters interpret it as, what do you call it? Like communion with the gods, or with the God Emperor specifically. Big on faith, because they've proven themselves in order to reach this status. Then we have the Parallel War suits. These are kind of close to like a Space Marine Dreadnought, just a little bit weaker. This is the strongest that's Sisters of Battle get in this system. You can see that's a unit level of 7 that puts them up next to like the Space Marine Terminators, and then they get their abilities obviously related to the suit itself, and then the weapons that are attached to the suit that you cannot swap out and pick up and exchange with others. And then we have Sisters Repentia. If you don't know, Sisters of Repentance are battle sisters that have been basically disowned, and they seek redemption in the fires of battle. They have their armor stripped from them, and their only thing is to kill basically as many enemies of the Emperor as they can until they literally die. So, you know, redeem yourself or die trying, literally. And then we have all the different sister orders. These are not the main 4 orders of sisterhood. These are just a bunch of different successor orders, effectively, that I just went and picked out to kind of pick ones that were more unique from each other. You'll see with the Sisters of Battle and the Agents of the Imperium, there is not nearly as many subclasses as there were for Space Marines. We had 9 Loyalists and 4 Heretic chapters for Space Marines. There is only 4 of the Sisterhood orders. Eternal Flame, they get special shield stuff. These obviously are like the same as the Space Marine chapters where they get special war gear, and then they get abilities and an oath to kind of hold themselves to as they go through. And you have the Order of the Rose, special abilities. These ones sacrifice one of their eyes to the God Emperor to make them kind of being able to pick up on Chaos Corruption more easily. You have the Blue of the Azure Sky, which are more helping out their teammates. These are the ones who will bless your allies with health and resistance to help yourself out, as well as putting demons down. Burning Horizon, these are the sisters who will get massive heavy melt-a-gun and melt-a-grenades, melt-a-bombs, effectively, and just do a fuck ton of extra damage. It's like if you wanted a battle sister that gets close to being like a Space Marine, this is where you see how quickly we ran through Sisters of Battle compared to Space Marines. We have Agents of the Imperium. These I thought about making like the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, who are the traditional boots on the ground soldiers, its own thing. But with Sisters of Battle and Space Marines, I wanted to make pick out specific members of the Guard and Inquisition and things like that that are just a step above. So that's where we get Agents of the Imperium. This is kind of just overall a wide-ranging group of members of the Imperium that rank high and would have more privileges and or more abilities given to them relative to the others like in their cast, like other members of the Guard and things like that. So you start out, we have an Inquisitor in power armor who gets a fuckload of powerful abilities, powerful weapons right off the bat, powerful melee right off the bat. They are just a straight up dude, but they're kind of close to a Space Marine in strength. Inquisition comes in your neighborhood, run. Yeah. The thing is, Inquisitors technically, very, very technically, on paper technically, can kind of tell anyone to do anything. Now, the thing with that is they can. That doesn't mean that the person they tell it to has to follow through, which can also have a lot of interesting effects or dynamics when you're playing through with a party at the table. You have rogue traders, which are basically just like really rich, spoiled kids. They're like people from noble households and stuff who have their own spaceship and are kind of allowed to do whatever as long as their goals are helping humanity for the greater good. Like, these are the standard RPG protagonists of Warhammer 40k, and I think these predate Warhammer 40k as a setting even. They're like space pirates. So because rogue traders are kind of on their own and they don't like have a specific loyalty to any army or chapter or anything like that, they can also take allies from like the Eldar and the Tau and stuff that like normally humanity won't work with. But they just have a lot of special political power and things like that. If you want to play as like, this is your chaotic neutral class. This is your Jack Sparrow class that kind of just does whatever. You have Honored Ogryn. Obviously, Ogryn are really, really stupid, but they're very powerful. An Ogryn could crush a Space Marine's head inside its helmet. So they have very, very powerful weapons, very, very powerful armor, and they are just really fucking strong if they get a hold of it. Because they are so loyal, they can just kind of straight up be lied to. Like a lot of the Ogryn during the Horus Heresy, when the Imperium split in half, the ones that were fighting against the God Emperor, I have classes. So no, all the classes and stuff, that we've been talking about, to rewatch streams will be getting cut out, and put out as a visual light on the channel, as well as again, if you want access to the full text guide, we're linked to Discord in chat. If you join Discord, this entire everything on Word, is up on Discord. I forgot I was saying something about Ogryn. They're not smart, but they're strong as shit. So if you want the all-out, all-strength, no brains, this is your one to go with. Veteran Guardsmen gain extra survivability and stuff, because when most guardsmen in Warhammer 40k have an average lifespan of about 15 hours, a guardsman who's been alive for way longer than that, who's been alive for weeks, if not years, is somebody to be afraid of. And that's the kind of guardsman you're playing when you're taking this. So obviously they have kind of basic weapons and stuff like that, but they're just really, really good at surviving on the battlefield when they are fighting alongside literally the angels of death and all the horrors that Warhammer has to offer. And then you have, so for Agents of the Imperium, they have their survival doctrines. So they have, leading by example, being up front and center, making a good example for the other soldiers they fight with. Fury and Flame, which is kind of like the you work best when you're trapped in a corner. Information Domination, which is kind of the Inquisitor or Mechanicus type thing, where you take information that may be classified and or dangerous and use it to your advantage, or use it to fuck up the enemy. And then you have Hammer Protocol, which is why use a scalpel when you can use a hammer, where you just sort of try to overwhelm your enemy rather than, responding to the enemy. Make sure you overwhelm them before anything even gets started. As again, you get your 2 warrior options, a bunch of different abilities. Say like the leader starts with a small squadron, which is actually, you get a unit balance and you would be able to get NPC units to follow you around. You have the Frenzy, which again, this is kind of along the same lines as the Sisters of Battle, where they're built to be in the underdog position, where if they are, being overwhelmed by the enemy, they kind of tend to fight better when they're on the back foot. Information Domination, you get extra stuff with Order, special technology, sowing doubt, controlling the flow of information, even within the Imperium, so you can lie to your allies if you feel like it. And then obviously Hammer Protocol, you get your specialty gear, and kind of like how the leader thing, you start with a small group of NPCs. For this one, it's set out, it tells you exactly what you're going to start out with as far as NPCs that you're leading, but it's a couple of starties and guardsmen to make sure that you arrive fully stacked for whatever you're doing. And then moving on, this is a series of classes that I wouldn't necessarily recommend anyone use, at least not for a first run, or at least if you don't have a thing figured out. These are very, very, very powerful classes that are mainly reserved for, like, if you are playing with your game master in a group and you're like, we don't want to play as Space Marines, we don't really want to play as Sisters of Battle or Guardsmen, like, we want to feel the full experience of the Warhammer power fantasy. That's what these classes are for. As you can see, the average unit level I have this for is set to 19, which is right below the God Emperor, Chaos Gods, everything like that. It's powerful stuff. This is basically turning on, cheats in a video game. That's what these classes are for. And you can see in the description here, there are very, very specific stuff for game masters, female custodies. If you really wanted to, yes, you could. That these classes don't even get subclasses. They are just really, really, really powerful characters for you to fuck around on if you wanted a campaign that was entirely balls to the walls and followed the Crusade or Odyssey of really powerful heroes within the Imperium. These are not entirely finished out. I am kind of still working on them. They're most of the way there, but not entirely. Your first one is Living Saints, which are mostly Sisters of Battle. There are some guardsmen and some members throughout the Imperium that can also become Living Saints. This is mainly going to be up between you and your Game Master, who gets special abilities to basically cleanse the battlefield of demons and make sure that they don't die, because they are effectively immortal in a way, blessed by the Emperor's light. Living Saints, incredibly fucking powerful. Gilded Custodes, if you wanted to play as a Custodes, a custodian of the Emperor, go through and be literally one of the strongest fighters on the boards, that's what this is. Again, you get abilities for dueling enemies or stepping in front of allies and stuff like that. This is probably the most balanced one if you ran it with regular characters. Like if you wanted to have a campaign set around a handful of guardsmen. Let me break out my angel. Yeah. If you wanted to have like a campaign that was set around like 4 or 5 guardsmen, and then one of the guardsmen was just like under the protection of a custodes, and you have like a 5th player play as the custodes who is like trying to keep that guy alive, you could definitely do that. And that's kind of what this is for. You have Knights of the Imperium, obviously, giant death machines. If a knight is shooting at you, you're fucked. A lot of bad stuff is going to happen. And that's what the knight is here for. If you want something that is just absolutely demonstrably powerful and will just obliterate anything it comes across, this is the special out-of-whack class specifically for that. And then last, definitely not least, if you wanted to play as a Lost Primarch. Still working on stuff for this. And the thing I had at the top of the description for these Heroes of the Imperium stuff, the Walking Church, no, that would be an Imperator Titan. It's not quite that strong, the Knight, but it is still quite strong. Like, a Knight could 1v1 most of the Primarchs. They are still fucking powerful death machines, even if they aren't Imperator Titan strong. But this is something I had on the, what do you call it? The main title slide for the Heroes of the Imperium, is that if you're doing something with a Lost Primarch, you and your Game Master should work together to probably make some other abilities that make your specific Lost Primarch feel more integrated into the universe. Because if you're unfamiliar with the Primarchs, Sons of the Emperor, there's 18, technically 19 that we know of. 9 of them remained loyal, 9 of them fell to chaos. There are 2 of them who were either executed or disappeared or went into the cosmos and were never seen again, but were stripped from all Imperial records. This is basically a class to reintroduce that idea for you, the player, to come in and play as one of these lost Primarchs. Gonna play Alfarius in a game. Yeah, your Lost Primarch could just be Alfarius pretending to be someone else. That could definitely be what you go with. But that's what that is. And if you were here from the beginning, you know I had a thing for AdMech. That's not here. I have plans to make AdMech classes and stuff like that. And if you're in the Discord, I leave update posts and stuff whenever I do update stuff to the guide, like patch notes, basically. And you can go through, and whenever I do add AdMech classes and stuff like that, that will be in the Discord updated for when those are added. This is a list of extra war gear, weapons, equipment, and stuff that you can run into. But this is basically just a list of extra abilities and stuff for somebody as a game master can give to their players. Special abilities, servo skulls, homing beacons, special abilities for your armor and things like that. Special weapons, from grav guns to heavy meltas to thunder hammers to special claws to storm shields to a custodes spear, power fists, a last fusel, an iron halo, or a chapter standard that gives you a bunch of bonuses. This is basically just a lot of different powerful abilities and stuff for you to pick up. We're getting into more of the lore and the campaign I have pre-made for this TTRPG, which technically, if you were doing your own thing, you don't have to use any of these. If you have like a very specific campaign or something you wanted to set up in the lore and the story I have built for it, these are all tied into it. So you have the Longevity, which is a cruiser of the Death Watch, which is going to be a main base of operations, a battle barge for your players to be using as a base of operations. The Black Wall, which is a Death Watch temple, a Space Marine temple. It's basically like a big barracks for Space Marines that is on one of the planets in the system that they will also use as a base of operations. And then a giant floating cathedral that is also above one of the planets. Because what's more Imperium than a cathedral in space? And they all have different upgrades and things like that that your players can do. So it's kind of like you're building up your home base as the campaign ramps up, and you have more to help you out as it goes on as well. So you have the Longevity. Things like cannons and stuff. Like this is what the... what do you call it? Imperial Fists had, where they can call down orbital bombardments, Helldiver style, as well as the reinforcements. which you can call down as well for if you're not playing as a hero, as a named character, if you're playing as the replaceable, infantry soldier. This is what determines how many times you can respawn effectively during the campaign or between deployments of the characters going on missions and quests and things like that. Stuff for the Black Wall, this is specifically for the planet that it's on, things like that. In the giant space cathedral, where, if you don't know, the 666 garrison of Warhammer 40k, Grey Knights, are here in case things get too bad and you as the game master need something to basically help the players out. As well as stats, different stat blocks for different allies and things you might run into, NPCs that you might want to take. So you have everything from the basic Imperial Guardsman. As you can see, it's set up kind of like the subclasses, all the NPC stat blocks, where you have weapons here at the top that just deal flat damage to the enemies, different abilities for said NPC, and then on the right, all of their base stats, their actions, how fast they are. That was a weird blip. What their armor is and how much health they have. You have regular guardsmen, you have guardsmen with ordnance, anti-tank type stuff, up to tanks. If you wanted to take a knight as an NPC, give it to your players so they can get a little bit of support as they go. Taking Space Marines as NPCs, heavier Space Marines, or even obviously Grey Knights as NPC allies. And I might add more to this list just so there's more than 2 for each sub-faction of the Imperium. But I don't tend to use a lot of NPC allies when I run campaigns. It's very specific to the campaign that I have built around this whole system. This is the Erebos system. It is a solar system, an apocalyptic solar system, made up of 5 planets, and on each planet, something horrible is going on. So, they are organized by threat level, basically generally how strong the enemies on each planet will be, based on the factions that are fighting there, based on how strong said factions are to the player. So you have Hayden starting at number 1. This is where your Deathwatch Temple is, the Black Wall. You'll find that there. Barbas, world being attacked by orcs. Rashaban is a Necron tomb world. It's got some lore story stuff going on there. I need to make a GM guide so you can run the story that I have planned out for this, because most of it is just in my head and I haven't taken the time to translate it to the page, but it is also there. Black Sun is a world being taken over by demons, and then Pestis is a world taken over specifically by Nurgle. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And this is basically a varied system of a bunch of different factions all fighting at once, just so you can have the excuse of I want my players to fight Tyranids, and I want my players to fight orcs, and I want them to fight chaos, and I want them to fight some Necrons, and you can get that variety in there of kind of everything is going wrong all at once, and your players are not expected to survive because of how shitty everything is. But that's, it's just there for you to interact with. Impressively long, well-made PowerPoint. Thank you. We've got a bunch of different Xenos and Chaos factions and stuff. Some of them are a little bit incomplete because I haven't gotten far enough in my campaigns to necessitate needing the stat blocks for certain enemies. So I just haven't completed them all the way yet, or they're a little bit undercooked. Some of them there. You'll see there in the middle, Blackwatch. That is a specific custom-made or a home-brewed enemy faction of heretical space marines that I have cooked into my campaign. That is also included here in this guide. So if we go through, you'll see all the enemies are kind of laid out similarly to the classes. You have your average unit level. Orcs is 7. So if your player characters are unit level 7 or right around there, they'll be able to fight orcs pretty much no problem. And then each enemy faction, so you'll see here at the bottom, there is a bunch of specific abilities to the orcs that all orcs have. And then as you go through each orc enemy, they have specific abilities and stats unique to different enemy types, as well as the classification. You can see in the bottom left, you have like small infantry, different levels of infantry, vehicle, monster, everything like that. Who are the Blackwatch descended from? We will get into that when we get to them. But as we see orcs, you just get orcs. You get bigger and bigger and bigger orcs until you get to like the big orcs. Tau, obviously. You have Tau drones, fire warriors, all the different battle suits going on. There's so much. I don't necessarily think it's too important to go through each and every one of the enemies. They just are there. Most of it reads the same. You get unit level, 2 attacks, all of their base stats, and then a bunch of abilities for them as well. And then they just move stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger on the pole. Some of them are probably, like, say, like Tau with the Storm Surge. This is Imperium propaganda. The Storm Surge should technically, by the level of the unit, like the unit level system I have in here, should be more up in line with like the Imperial Knights and stuff like that. But it's just a bit weaker and has a lot less health because the Tau in this system are like a low level army for your players to fight that would be easier to take on even the upper end of them, you know. Tyranids, they've got all their, hive mind stuff and everything like that going on. Moving all the way from Ripper Swarms, which are kind of just there to be a pest. Then you've got your Termagants, the winged Ripper Swarms. Nom Nom Boys, exactly. Barbagonts, Von Ryan's Leapers, the Tyranid Warriors. You can see some of these have like blank spots here for abilities and stuff. Those are the ones that I just haven't gotten time to get around to yet. Stalkers, the Screamer Killer, Psychophage, Nero Tyrant, and then a big Tyranid Dragon, just in case you really want to fuck over your players. This is not nearly the strongest they get, though. And then a Biotitan. World Eaters, obviously, play a big point, having the Chaos Space Marines in here. There's no specifically like generic Chaos Space Marine. Maybe that would be a good faction to introduce. Maybe. That might be something I work on in the future. Obviously, you go from like the Jackals, Traitor Guard, World Eater Marines, shitty Chaos Apothecaries, Berserkers, and stuff like that, Terminators, and even Dreadnoughts. And you'll see, especially with a lot of the enemy factions, you could see it big here with the World Eaters, is that some enemies will have the same ability, but it's just a stronger or weaker version of the ability. Say like the World Eaters, their big thing is they want to get right up in your face and fuck you over when they get right up to you. Say like the World Eater Terminator has a grapple attack it can use on players to basically just ruin their day. The Dreadnought has the same grapple attack, it just ruins their day even harder. So a lot of the units within a faction may share abilities and stuff like that. They will just be stronger and or weaker depending on, you know, its role in the the faction as a whole. The Blackwatch are a renegade chapter of Space Marines that are homebrewed for me for this campaign. They are effectively, because we are in a system mainly dominated by the Deathwatch. There is a Deathwatch temple in the system on Hayden's. There's a lot of members of Deathwatch here. The Blackwatch are a kind of doomsday cult of the Space Marines who believe that like the way that they need to serve the Emperor's will is to cleanse the galaxy, because the galaxy is so fucked, it's so rotten, everything fucking sucks to the point where it would be better for the Imperium and mankind as a whole to wipe it from the face of the galaxy and maybe hopefully start anew afterwards in a rebirth, like a Ragnarok type situation, rather than trying to like staggeringly coexist with all of the, you know, chaos and aliens that exist in the Warhammer 40k galaxy. And that's effectively what the Blackwatch are. They're not chaos, they're not They don't like aliens or the Chaos Gods. They're still anti that. They are still pro the Emperor. They are just like a doomsday cult, effectively. And then you'll see you've got all the different renegade guards and the Blackwatch Marines and stuff like that. And there is specific abilities here that state that the Blackwatch have access to all of the same Vox communications and things like that as the player characters, if the player characters are Space Marines. Basically meaning the biggest thing about the Blackwatch is that they're kind of Alpha Legion in that way, where their tactics are going to wrap around fucking with the players to throw them off the scent as they're going on trying to do their own mission throughout the galaxy, if not trying to recruit the players to their cause, which is, it's a TTRPG. If the players really, really want to do that, they could do that. How it works, and it's your job as a game master, if you're running like this campaign, to facilitate that. And they just move up throughout the thing. You get tougher Marines, psychers to deal with, and then even like Blackwatch captains. We have what I describe as bosses. These are tough characters to fight that belong to each different enemy faction. Like each faction has their own boss, and most of these bosses are not intended to be defeated. Some of them, like the Tyranids or the Tau, you can get away with, or like the Blackwatch boss is obviously something that you're intended to fight at the end of the campaign. The rest of these are mainly there, so when things get bad enough, these are the enemies you throw at your players to be like, yeah, you need to leave, or you need to be really, really lucky. I have had players get lucky with these once upon a time, and even one of these here, if you see this big lovely corn fellow on the left, Salazar, is actually one of the characters one of my friends was running in a one-shot of this, who fell to chaos in record time. But it worked out so well in the campaign and like narratively and everything that I just made him into a full-time boss within the game itself. So if you go through, you've got the big Quark. The bosses all have their own special abilities, things like that tie into their faction or make them really, really, really powerful. You've got a giant Tau gunship you got to deal with. It's got its own things about going up into orbit and then coming down to do bombing runs and then going up into orbit, and kind of like you have to play around it. You got the big massive Tyranid to deal with. Necron Lord. It's one of the ones you probably throw at your players to ruin their day. This is the leader of the Blackwatch. His whole thing. If I write up a guide for the campaign, this will probably be the one boss that gets the most love put into the concept of the encounter that you fight him in. And then there's stat blocks here for people like Angron. Angron is a demon Primarch of the World Eaters. His top, it's not really like an ability, but his top feature here is that the Primarch will not stop. If you come across him, you either have to kill him or or die, because he will not let you get away. These are not really intended. These are kind of like the same idea as the Heroes of the Imperium classes. Like, if you wanted to do a campaign where you're like, I want to play as a Lost Primarch, followed by an entourage of a Living Saint, an Imperial Knight, and some Custodes, and we're going to go hunt down Angron, one of the Demon Princes. That's where that's for. Because if you're playing as regular people, if you're just playing as regular Space Marines with like a Sister of Battle and a Guardsman, you're not going to be Angron. Or at least you shouldn't. Unless you really, really buff yourself up. But more likely than not, you're going to get taken out. And that's kind of in the inverse of the Heroes of the Imperium being really, really playing into the power fantasy. The bosses are here to put you down and kind of humble you. And then obviously there's individual demon princes that are kind of also really strong, but these are just so you can throw chaos flavored bosses at the players that are not super powerful, but are also fairly strong as well. Obviously, you get the Nurgle one, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and that is it. That is the end of this guide as it is. If we don't have any more questions or anything like that, we are going to be moving on to the Yap Fest.